It's about this Moscow for their times. They don't speak on Ukraine.
Yeah, I had the impression. It's not that it's something that looks like that.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we will be slowly starting our meeting. It's 10 to 8, so I think it's time to begin. My name is Jarek Łachecki. I'm a chairman of the Irish Polish Society. I want to welcome you in the Polish House. I want to welcome our guest. But before I leave the room for Patrick to introduce our distinguished guest, I just have a sad announcement to make. As the members of the Irish Polish Society know already, Maciej Smoleński has died last Sunday peacefully in his house in Oldbound. For those of you who don't know Maciej, he was one of the founders of the Irish Polish Society, and he's been in this house since the beginning of the house. So he always been an active person. He's been a chairman of the society for quite a few years, and we will miss him. And he was a secretary. We will miss him a lot. Now, his removal will be on Friday morning, the 7th of March, to South Orleans Church. That will be 11:30. That's funeral mass, and the burial will be in. Well, I don't know that. Where is this exactly? Bonarbina Cemetery. That's in Oldbound, I would guess. That's in Tala. Some information I left on the notice board, so you'll have a chance to check. And I think it will be a proper way to do if we commemorate him with the minute of silence. So I'd like to ask everybody to stand for minutes. And let's just remember Maciej as a good friend and member of the Irish Polish Society. Thank you. Okay, Patrick?
Thanks for that, Gary. And we would all remember Maciej fondly, and especially for his singing. He had many wonderful concerts when he performed here. I don't think we'll hear the like of that voice again. Of course, yeah. And thank you very much for coming here tonight. We have plenty of seats at the front, and we have people at the back want to come in. We're delighted to have our esteemed guest, Seamus Martin. He's one of the most prestigious Irish journalists. A very long career since he started in the Irish press, and still going strong, still writing for the newspapers in his retirement, semi-retirement. He was, for many years as well, Moscow correspondent of the Irish Times, and he spoke to us here 3 years ago on his researches in the state archives in Russia with the story of Kazimir Markievicz, the husband of Countess Markievicz, and he shared that story with us about how that the Tsar's secret police spied upon him and gave an account of his life in Paris in 1899. And he is also an author. He has written 2 books, historical novel, Duggan's Destiny, and a memoir, Good Times and Bad, from the Crimea to the Kremlin. He is broadcaster also. His documentary series, Death of an Empire, on the fall of the Soviet Union, which was broadcast a year or so ago, won a number of awards. So he's a man that has a lot of knowledge of the fall of the Soviet Union and the states that have arisen in the meantime since the collapse of the Soviet Union. He's here tonight now to talk about the situation in Ukraine and to draw on his experiences with the Organisation of Security and Cooperation in Europe when he acted as an observer in the parliamentary and presidential elections in 2010, 2012. So the Irish Polish Society is, although people think it's just Irish Polish, but we're open to people from all countries, really, from all opinions, and we hope that we will have a very good discussion with you all tonight now, and with Seamus. Okay, so I will give the floor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seamus.
I don't know if you can hear me at the back. Okay. Any Ukrainians here? 1, 2, 3. East or west?
West.
West. Okay.
Visitors from Russia,
And someone from Russia as well. I should explain that as Pat has announced, that I did work as for the OSCE in Ukraine. But I must say that anything I say tonight does not necessarily reflect the views of the OSCE. They're my own personal views from my own personal experiences. And my experiences in Ukraine began many years ago. There's a man here, Jan Kaminsky. It was my first visit to Ukraine, was with him back in the 1970s to watch a football match between the Soviet Union and Ireland in Kyiv. But since then, in my time as Moscow correspondent of the Irish Times, I worked, visited Kyiv and Lviv, and also Crimea, which is very much in the news at the moment. And I actually was on the ships of the Black Sea Fleet, which at the time I certainly didn't regard as being a threat to anyone. They were in pretty bad shape, and they still are. For the OSCE, in the presidential elections in 2010, I was first of all based in Vinnytsia and Jmerinka, which is nearby, and then in the second round in Ivano-Frankivsk and nearby in Nadvirna. And then in the more recent parliamentary elections, I was fortunate enough to be sent to the Donbass for 3 months. I was quite pleasantly surprised. I had expected Donetsk and Makivka and places like that to be very polluted and heavily industrialized. But Donetsk, I discovered, is a very green city, lots of trees, and any facilities that you would need, really. So, as you can see, I've worked in the capital, in Crimea, in eastern Ukraine, and western Ukraine. So I've been around the place quite a lot. Ukraine is a divided country. And it's divided not just in 2 ways. It's divided in many ways. In Galicia, for example, places such as Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, and those areas, their history, religion, and language is extremely different from the people in the East. They originally sort of grew up through the Austro-Hungarian Empire. There is a strong Greek Catholic community. There is large majority, almost entirely, are Ukrainian speakers. In the east, they came up through the Tsarist Empire and were ruled from St. Petersburg. They are, in the main, those who are religious are members of the Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate, and they speak Russian. But they are not Russians. They are ethnic Ukrainians. They are Ukrainian people. They speak the language of another country, just in the way that we speak the language of another country as well. Crimea is different. Many, if not most, of the Russian-speaking population there are ethnic Russians. Their peninsula was part of Russia, or part of the Russian Socialist Soviet Republic until the mid-1950s. When the Soviet Union came to an end, the Crimean Tatars began to return. They had been exiled into Central Asia and elsewhere, places such as Uzbekistan, by Stalin during the war. They now make up about 14% of the population, in Crimea, that is. Tatars in Ukraine, I suppose the best known person is Rinat Akhmetov, who is Ukraine's richest person. He is very rich. He owns Shakhtar Donetsk, the football team, which is quite good team. When I was there last, there was a very interesting match between Shakhtar Donetsk, owned by Ukraine's richest man, and Chelsea, owned by Russia's richest man, Roman Abramovich. And Shakhtar beat Chelsea that night. But Akhmetov is so rich that you may have read of this new building in London called Number 1 Park Lane, which is the most expensive apartment block on earth. And the penthouses are the most expensive apartments in Number 1 Park Lane. Akhmetov bought 2 of them and brought in the building people to knock them into one. So this is the sort of wealth you're talking about, and it's fairly typical of what happened in many of the Soviet republics after the end of the Soviet Union. People became very wealthy very quickly and not in a very clean way. And this is part, or plays a part, in the problems of Ukraine today. There are oligarchs, just as there are in Russia. There is a very corrupt tier of society. I'm not saying that the entire society of Ukraine by any means is corrupt, but there is a level of people who are exceptionally corrupt. For example, the Transparency International, which is an organization which investigates corruption throughout the world, rates Ukraine as more corrupt than Russia. We all, in our minds, it's all implanted that Russia is an extremely corrupt country. Transparency International rates Russia as the 117th in the world, but it rates Ukraine as 134th. So the ordinary Ukrainian people have been very badly served by their oligarchs and by their politicians. They are the victims. And when Yanukovych announced that he was moving towards Moscow rather than towards Brussels, a genuine rising up took place. People went onto the Maidan Nizalezhnosti in Kyiv to protest against this, and protest very strongly. And they represented the large majority of the Ukrainian population. But things developed from there. And there, in my view at least, it became not a simplistic story of the bad guys led by Yanukovych against the good guys who opposed him, because there were hardly any good guys on Yanukovych's side, but there were some bad guys in the opposition. And the bad guys were mainly led by Oleg Tyakhnybok, who was the leader of Svoboda, which is an extreme right-wing party, and then by Dmytro Yarosh of Pravi sector, right sector, who was even more extreme. So you had Tyakhnybok's people who are extreme politically, but Yarosh's people who were physically extreme. On the other side, you had Berkut, the riot police, who were extremely violent. But you also had a group of young men known as Titushki, after a very violent martial arts exponent called Vadim Titushko. And they were on the government side. So it was impossible with those people to keep the demonstration peaceful. And the response from Yanukovych was to let Berkut loose on the demonstrators. And I think 88 people was the official figure of the number of people killed, but it was probably closer to 100. They were mainly civilian, peaceful protesters, but there were members of the police who were killed. And when I say the police, I'm talking about the ordinary Ukrainian police, who, in the large majority, other than their superior officers, but the ordinary guys were young conscripts who didn't want to be there. So they, in my view, were the only good guys on the government side. They were ordinary kids who were conscripted into the police force from all over the country, and they just, many of them surrendered. There were pictures of them being, marched into a building off the Maidan. So as I say, in my view, the people of Ukraine have been badly served by their politicians, not only by Yanukovych and the Party of Regions and his allies in the Communist Party, but following the Orange Revolution, we had a situation where Viktor Yushchenko became president, and Yulia Tymoshenko became prime minister. The Great Revolution had taken place, and now these people were in power, but they fought with each other. They undermined each other. The end result was that when the presidential election came around again in 2010, the hero of the Orange Revolution, Viktor Yushchenko, got 5% of the vote in the first round. In the second round, Yanukovych defeated Tymoshenko with a very slender majority. I think mainly because his people got their voters out, were more efficient in getting their supporters to the polls than Tymoshenko's people. I was based, as I say, in the second round in Ivano-Frankivsk, mainly in the area of a town called Nadvirna, which is outside, and then down southward, Deliatin and the Oromcha, heading towards the Romanian border. And it was a huge majority for Tymoshenko. But that was negative by the situation in the east and elsewhere in some small parts of the west, where the party of regions got Yanukovych's people out to vote. Most of the oligarchs supported Yanukovych, but the new government has its own oligarchs as well, and they've been sent out as new governors to cities in the east. And when we come to the new government, we're now into an area where we're talking about Russia's interest. And whatever one thinks of Vladimir Putin, he's no fool. He ruthlessly pursues Russian interests and doesn't care what other people think about what he does. I remember one British diplomat saying to me, we're going into another football analogy, that Russian foreign policy under Putin reminded him of the supporters of Millwall Football Club in England, whose chant is, "No one likes us, we don't care." So that element does exist. And when Yanukovych was ousted, the Russian position became, and still is, that Yanukovych was the elected president of Ukraine, and the only legal way to get rid of Yanukovych was to have him defeated at the polls, or to have an election in which he didn't stand and someone else won. Their argument is that he is still president of Ukraine until something like that takes place through the ballot box, rather than through his being forced out of office. Having said that, it's pretty well known that Putin, on a personal basis, does not like Yanukovych. In fact, he probably despises him. On the other hand, Putin is very clear, and has said it several times, that Yulia Tymoshenko is someone I can do business with. And I'll get around to that later. So, why did Russia suddenly and smoothly take control of Crimea? My view is that they wanted to use Crimea as leverage in any talks that would take place to have a resolution of the situation in Ukraine. They now exercise control in Crimea. There are talks going on in Paris between John Kerry, the foreign Secretary of State in the United States, and Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. And I'm pretty sure that Lavrov will say, okay, we give up Crimea, what are you going to do for us? There is some evidence of what Russia actually wants. They want the Ukrainian government to get rid of certain people from their new cabinet. These would be the extreme right-wing people. The Deputy Prime Minister, for example, is a member of Svoboda. He has been a subject of very strong international controversy before these events, due to a statement he made in which he blamed women's lifestyle, saying that basically that was the reason why women were raped, which is, it gives you an idea of the mentality. Also, in the new National Defence Council, the National Secretary is Andriy Parubi, who was a founder of a neo-Nazi organisation, but his views have mellowed since that time, but he's certainly no sort of Western-style Democrat. The Russians want him out too. And Yarosh, Dmytro Yarosh, is Parubi's deputy in the National Defence Council, and he is the most extreme. Now, will they be able to get their way there? They certainly have said that they will move their troops back in Crimea, that they will assert the fact that Crimea will remain a part of Ukraine under that condition of getting rid of the right wing from the Ukrainian government, and Ukraine returning to the internal autonomy it had initially when Ukraine became independent. At that time, Crimea had an autonomy which is not unlike the current situation in Scotland. It had its own parliament, elected its own president and prime minister, etc. But as the years went by, that authority was eroded. The prime minister or president of of Crimea must now be approved by Kiev. So the Russians are looking for that autonomy to return. They're probably looking for a lot more than this as well, but this is the position they're putting forward, their negotiating position. And Russian people that I've been in touch with, how would I describe them? Officials. Without saying it directly, believe that the person who can, from the Ukrainian side, can deliver a peace settlement that Russia would agree with is Yulia Tymoshenko. That she is the person that Putin can do business with. The question remains open, though: how strong is she now within Ukraine? Can she bring the rest of her supporters and the disparate opposition, can she bring them together to do a deal to calm things down, to get Crimea back as a Ukrainian region, to calm down the situation in the east of the country? And I don't think that needs much calming. Despite the fact that people in the east, particularly the Donbass area, are Russian speakers and have strong connections with Russia. They are Ukrainians and they want to remain in Ukraine. They were upset by one of the very first actions of the new government, which was to repeal the law which allowed Russian to be an official language in areas which had more than 10% of Russian speakers in the population. There has been, I think, a very positive development in western Ukraine, led by the mayor of Lviv, Andriy Sadovy, who called on his citizens to speak Russian for a day in solidarity with his fellow Ukrainians in the east, and to ask for this law to be reinstated. He made a very good speech, which I saw over the internet in Russian, speaking to his fellow Ukrainians in the east, and also to the people of Crimea. If only every politician in Ukraine adopted a similar attitude, I think the situation would be a great deal better. I'm prepared to take any questions from people as well, if they would like to ask on stuff that I've said anyway, at least. So, yes?
Can I actually ask?
Okay, first and second. Okay.
You never mentioned what Putin is saying, that it was all illegal, and they want the deal from the 21st of February signed by our unfortunate foreign minister Sikorski, although Yanukovych haven't signed it. So what about this part, because this means bringing Yanukovych at least till the end of the year?
I think that they do, as I hinted at or touched on this earlier when I said that they regard Yanukovych as still being the president of Ukraine. The deal of the 21st, which was done between Yanukovych and the opposition, also with the foreign ministers of Poland, France and Germany, specified December as the date of the election. Now the election has been called for the 25th of May. I feel that it would be very silly of Russia to demand an election in December rather than May. It's a few months, and no matter when the election takes place, Yanukovych will no longer be president of Ukraine. So I feel that it would be very silly not to compromise on that particular issue. Yeah.
Can I take off my jacket?
You're looking for fight.
I'm not going to work. Seamus, I know you for a long time. I haven't recognized you today when I approached you.
No, I recognize you.
Listening to your voice, something ticked in my ear, and I decided, I know you better when I ask you for your name. You said Seamus Martin. I heard you on the news talk, I think, a few days ago, interviewing. I said, my God, I must get in touch with him. I forgot him altogether, you see. And then promptly I forgot his name, you see. Because I too am under stress a little bit. I won't tell you all the secrets, but I'm under stress and I tend to forget quickly now what happened. But I can tell you everything what happened 60 years ago. Because I came to Ireland in 1955, 1960. So I've been in Ireland that long, you see. As far as I'm concerned, the theme that you're talking about, I lost thread of it actually, you know, the way you were talking. I lost the thread because I didn't know where you were aiming at, you see. For instance, there's a relationship between Poland and Ukrainians, as well as Russia and Ukrainians. Poland is also outstanding. Remember, Poles suffered extremely from the Ukrainians. Poland lost Lvov, you see, the east of Poland was Ukrainian, but technically, really, because the Russians were deciding, so therefore they decided the parts of Poland that was before the war would go to the Ukrainians, to create tensions between the two countries. That was the main interest for Russia, you see. Now, going back to your theme, you know, to try to cite, what I can't decipher is that I think you have a lot of notes there, you look at them, and you lost track really where you're aiming at, you see. Am I right or not? What do you think?
What's the question, Jan? What's the question? What's the point?
You lost track of where you were. You see, you shouldn't take notes, because notes, you see, don't lead to anything. But I have strictly in my mind, you know, what I really want to ask. You see, Seamus, I know you very well.
What's the question?
Well, the question.
Just go.
No, this is a theme. I'm talking about the theme of the.
May I ask you a question?
Not specifically, I'm introducing myself and introducing you that I have known of old times, you said. We were friends,
Okay.
so we were
May I ask the
exchanging.
question then?
Yeah.
I'm a Trinity man. I was very active. Excuse me, can I take your time a little bit like that? No, I hear there's some
Give us the
voices
question,
saying-
Jan. Give us the question.
Some voices here, you know, who say that I shouldn't waste my time talking about myself. It's the question of Ukraine. Poland lost a lot of Ukraine as a result of the Russian dominance of the whole region after the Second World War. That's the way they decided, and they thought they actually, by dividing like that Poland and Ukraine, they make enemies of one another to one side. That was in the interest of Russia, but they were the dominant figure, power in that area. They could decide anything. They created Polish Communist government, they submitted, they agreed that everything was good. Lwów was a sacred Polish city. There's still a lot of Polish people, you know. But at the moment we are not quarreling with one another because we have a common enemy. Russia is an enemy to Ukrainians and to Poles. How it's going to end, I don't know, you see, but the question which I have to ask now, do you think the Ukrainians have a just cause to claim Crimea as part of their, I wouldn't say traditional, but their real interest? Crimea belongs to see, I'm getting mixed up with myself, like yourself, you see. So, Ukrainian, the Polish territory, Ukraine, but it really belongs to Ukraine. But the Poles want back that territory. I'm speaking now about Poland, you see, not the Russians. You said enough about the Russians, you see. So Poland has claims on those territories, and everybody loves there's all the Poles in Ukraine now. And it's an important aspect. Do you want to say something?
No, I just want to ask you to do a conclusion, Jan, please.
To the conclusion. But the question is there any chance for Poland getting back the territories which belonged to Poland before from the Ukrainians? Or should the Poles and the Ukrainians form a federation and share the two territories between them and live together as friends, not as enemies? Thank you very much.
The question of giving back or sharing Lviv and Stanislav and towns like that doesn't arise anymore. It's important that the political boundaries remain as they are, and that includes Crimea remaining as part of Ukraine.
But
Yeah,
has
my
Poland
answer to
got,
that question.
the important thing, the question is, has
Yeah.
Poland
And
got
I
a
think,
claim?
you know, there are other people who want to talk.
Speaker,
Sorry, the man behind, sorry, was before you.
Seamus, sorry, I'd like to comment on the statement that the far right, parties actually, kind of, you said, that basically the revolution and the fighting was kind of, instigated by the far right parties. I say that it's not correct.
I didn't say that anyway.
Yeah, but this is what I understood, because the course of event, the whole thing was going on for 3 months, and what actually, got people very upset and angry was were the laws which were passed on January 16th, So that was really, the moment when everything started to explode. And, given, perhaps, we cannot give too much credit to the right side parties like Svoboda and so on. They were there, but on the other hand, my impression was that they were not really, controlling the crowd. They were not the driving force. Rather, Maidan and the whole crowd. These were the people who telling politicians and the others, what to do. So that was not the right side parties.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think that the majority of the people in the Maidan were involved in violence. Absolutely, that's absolutely true. But the right sector was involved in violence, and they were a small minority, but they were there. This can't be denied, I'm afraid.
Nobody denied it.
Sorry?
Can I just say, I'm not going to criticize you, just my opinion, you can listen to yours, can you listen to mine. I think at the moment, I'm monitoring the situation, I don't watch TV, I just monitor the situation through the internet, through the actually live posts, like what, because it's also people who are working in informational, to deliver information. Now, at the moment, listening to you, I do understand that we are losing in the informational front, because everything what you are saying, you have only the top kind of, you just taken the top of the iceberg, and you kind of go through, but I think developments in Ukraine are so fast, probably people are not following that fast, because sometimes I'm watching, I'm seeing a Twitter, and then I see Facebook, and maybe half an hour, events can be different. And so I feel that you have very basic knowledge about what the situation, what is really about out there. Even about the right sector, you say it was all the people from all nationalities, including there is nothing to do with neo-fascism and all this what you kind of trying to persuade. I think this but I think Polish people, because they went through that what we are going through now, I think they're more politically aware what is going on at the moment, so I think everybody's going to have their own conclusions anyway, but I'm just saying that you can't say this is true what you're saying. This is only your opinion as well as it's mine.
Yes, I'm only expressing my opinion. It's allowed in this country.
I'm just saying that we are losing informational war at the moment to Russia, and it's really very sad, but we are working very hard, believe me, even in Ireland. It's only 3,500 people, Ukrainians, live here, but for the past 3 months we kind of never connected, but people who are never connected before, now they are. And it's kind of, for me, I'm proud to see this, my nation is becoming a real nation, and I'm really proud of it. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Martin, can Martin get in there? His hand.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Martin's been trying to get in.
Okay, sorry, Martin.
Speaker, can I ask just a few very basic questions, very simple, because I don't know a lot. What's the population, and what's the land area in comparison with, say, Poland or Germany? And what's the main economy?
Well, Ukraine is almost exactly the same size as France. It's a very big country. Population 45, 46, 47 million. Ukrainians speaking in general west of the Dnieper River, Russian speaking to the east and south. There are two main economic assets. There is the land. The Ukrainian land is the richest land in Europe, certainly. So agriculture is extremely important. The cereal crops, particularly wheat. If there's a bad harvest in Ukraine, it's going to affect the price of your bread in the supermarket in Dublin. Right. Then there is huge metallurgical and coal mining centre, mainly in the Donbass, with Donetsk as the major city. Donetsk was founded by a Welshman called John James Hughes. Because of his surname, he became known as Yuzovka. He was a Welsh capitalist mining entrepreneur who moved into the area in the time of the Tsars and developed Donetsk until I think his people and his company still owned the entire mining area until the revolution, after the revolution of 1917, and then it was taken over. It was briefly Donetsk, you don't read this in the history books, but after it was Yuzovka for a few months, it was called Stalina, and then became Donetsk. They say it was called Stalina because they made steel there, but other people disagreed. So that's just a very brief.
Okay, thank you very much.
David here as well.
Yeah, you have the
I want to say shortly.
lady there.
I would like to comment
Can I
on
speak
your...
again?
And we have some other people, please.
I don't want to get
Excuse
confused.
me,
Let's
Just
just wait.
Yeah.
Let's some other thing.
You already spoke. I'm just asking one question. You outlined the Russian position very well. I think I was able to understand what they really want, and it's kind of reassuring that they don't want the fascists there, even from Polish point of view, because all the grievances might come into force or something like that. But what is your opinion about the role of Russian diplomacy in a person of Sergei Lavrov? I was very impressed reading about him, how skillful he is. Do you think his talent could bring the diplomatic solution quicker, or does he have no impact, no influence on Putin, maybe? I don't know what's the relation between him and Putin is personally.
Lavrov is a very tough guy,
Yeah.
but Putin is tougher. You know, as they say about diplomats, a famous English diplomat back in the 17th century described a diplomat as an honest gentleman who is sent abroad to lie for his country. So diplomats don't, when a diplomat speaks, he's not using his own words or giving his own opinion. He's giving the opinion of his superiors who are telling him what to do. But Lavrov is a very professional diplomat. However, what he says are Putin's words.
I was also recently watching on Russian television, I happen to understand Russian, interview of Lavrov with, it was a kind of a program, entertaining program like Late Show, and was surprised how Lavrov is sort of ridiculing Americans all the time. It's in the Russian psyche a little bit. I was a bit surprised about that they haven't changed much.
Well, actually, anti-American speeches and policies have been put forward a lot in recent times. It's quite an interesting development. There's someone from Russia here.
First of all, I want to say thank you, because it's actually a very suicidal mission to kind of give the really kind of the view, because it is a very confusing situation, and to me, kind of it's a very complex situation. So it's so many factors are involved, and kind of, you know, that every analysis would be kind of not sufficient enough, you know. So I kind of think at the same time, there are a few things I kind of want to say, and there are, first of all, information war, you know, and Russia, which I left 11 years ago, that time actually it's kind of demonstrated many signs of coming dictatorship, you know, so we have this kind of, in terms of democracy is absence of that. So Putin is a very strong leader, but unfortunately, in terms of Russian kind of people, and freedom of speech is none. We know that kind of, especially in Moscow, when opposition is on the streets, there are many political kind of, kind of trials and stuff. So that's one thing, and this is why I am personally inspired by Ukrainian people who actually stood up against that corrupt government, So it's very inspiring for Eastern region, which kind of is actually under the very kind of controlled, power of a small group of people. It wasn't, I kind of think, my kind of, as well, kind of, I want to say that my point of view is based on analysis of American professor of Yale University, Timothy Snyder. He is a kind of writing.
Yale University.
Yeah. Sorry, I cannot pronounce it correctly.
Can I?
No, please.
Listen.
I just want to say that I understand that, especially here, everybody tries to avoid the harsh words, kind of like occupation, like invasion. But I think that's what we deal with, and it is actually very difficult time. I would question your point of view in terms of that Russia wants a right wing kind of go away, and that's their kind of a sort of intention. I kind of think that there is an interest political, and because Putin got a slap across his face politically when Yanukovych was kind of sent away. So I kind of, and Timothy Snyder actually predicted that with invasion, the right-wing kind of nationalist kind of, tendencies rise up as normal thing. Saying that, he's kind of saying that it was people's revolution was started by, Muslim activists and Jewish community was involved, and everybody, we can see photographs, make sure that you check internet. Don't watch Russian TV. It's pure kind of propaganda. I grew up in Soviet time. That reminds me what I kind of, we all know about it,
I can detect that it's propaganda.
So, unfortunately, and there are many people confused, and therefore, but I understand that there are no kind of solutions, clear cuts, saying that there is a kind of probably expectation of more like strong kind of, if somebody bullied, we expect somebody kind of to stand up, that's what expected from Europe, I suppose.
So we ask for the question.
I just want to comment kind of on what I said.
I'd like to make just clarify something. When I spoke about Russia wanting to get rid of the right wing, I wasn't expressing my point of view. I was expressing their point of view. And they have said that this is a part of the deal that they want.
All I want to say for you to make a comment on that subject, can we ever resolve the dispute between the Ukrainians and Poland regarding the Eastern territories? Thank you.
I don't think there is a dispute at the moment.
There is.
Those who refer to that type of dispute are living in the past.
I have a few questions. I'll be very fast. I take it that you were an observer at the last presidential election.
I was, yes.
Yes. Did you think that they were fair?
I was an observer in one part.
No, just your own part.
I will, as I began here, I said that I cannot give my opinion as an observer, because the OSCE issued its report at the end of that election and said that the election fulfilled most of the international requirements. It basically said, yes, Yanukovych was elected.
Fairly.
Fair. They don't use the term free and fair. That's not part of the OSCE's vocabulary.
Anyway, my next question is, do you think it was right for the Assistant Secretary of State of the US to go and join the protest in the middle of Kiev, along with one of her senators, John McCain, along with some of the German ministers, and she to hand out cookies and encourage what was going on. Now, most of the people that she handed the cookies to were her mercenaries from the US. I know some of them from their faces from the way back, and they were there. And you made the point about the Ukrainian police being savages.
No, I didn't say that. No.
They took some savage beatings from the protesters.
I said that Berkut acted in a very savage manner, and they did.
Well,
I said the police are a different factor.
The next point I want to ask you is, do you think the US were right to go in and invade Iraq and leave 1.5 million widows and in a country like that? This month, in 2003, Baghdad fell. I was watching all of that. It was a lovely lit city before the American planes went in. And the last point I want to make to you is the way the present president of the Ukraine was ousted and those who took over, they have no legitimacy whatsoever. But yet and all the West are accolating them as though they had won the election. And I'll make a comment for the last time. I think NATO has passed its sell-by date, and it should be stuck down. And then we might get a bit of peace in the world.
I didn't come here to talk about Iraq, to be honest. I did think that the Assistant Secretary of State's behaviour was very unusual, especially the conversation she had with the US ambassador in Kiev, which she ended up using the words "fuck the European Union," which wasn't a very diplomatic thing to say from someone who's purported to be a diplomat. However, the reason why her words became known was because the Russians were tapping the phones of the United States Embassy. But as the American National Security Agency says, everybody does it. So there you go.
Seamus, just to follow on from what Sean was asking there, Yanukovych, as far as I can see, he wasn't actually toppled. He ran away. I mean, he had that deal with the opposition.
Yeah, but
he had the deal. He effectively, could have been able to stay in.
Well, the deal. It struck me that the deal lasted. Was done by the politicians. It was done by the people at the political level, and was not acceptable to the people on the street. So the game was up. The deal lasted for a number of hours only, I think.
But I think the threat was martial law, wasn't it, if the deal wasn't accepted?
Well, there wasn't any martial law, was there? But I would also get back to the business about, the idea that everyone who was on the Maidan was good. I think people have to accept that Svoboda was there, that Pravi sector was there. And are we in the danger of moving into, which I always consider to be very dangerous?
What is your problem with right sector? Can you tell us? Can you elaborate on that, please?
What's my problem with right sector?
Please.
They are an extreme right-wing group. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. However, look, Svoboda got 2 million votes in the parliamentary elections at the end of 2012. They've been described by some people as pro-European because they were on the Maidan. In fact, Svoboda is part of the Alliance of European national movements. That includes the British National Party. It includes Fiamma Tricolore, the Italian neo-fascists. It includes the Front National of Le Pen in France. And I think Ukrainians are inclined to think that if you are against Yanukovych, you're good. There's an old expression in English, my enemy's enemy is my friend. And it has been a policy that has caused disasters throughout Europe. Thank you.
You know what is Nazi? What is going on now in Ukraine by the side of Russia? This is Nazism. What right sector did on the Maidan after they start to steal the people from the hospitals, after they start, it's more than 300 people still missing on the street. Nobody knows where they are. When they start to burn the cars on the streets of Kyiv, and people start to be afraid to go outside because they came and go to Tushik and start to beat people up, just passing by vehicles. This is fascism. What you're looking about is not fascism. These people that stand up for their country, and when they start to do horrible things to the people, only then people respond with the fire, with all this cocktail of Molotovs and stuff like this. You can't blame right sector because you live in the country where everything was doing on the left, by the left hand. Nothing was doing by the right hand. And this is right hand come to, because there's educated people there, there's compositors, there are the teachers, there are the students who study law, who study economics, the people who came from Canada, Ukrainians from Canada, Ukrainians from all over the world, they were fighting there in the right moment. You're saying this is our blood there. This is our blood we're fighting there, and you can't spread this even your own opinion and saying this is true, because lots of people here sitting and listening to you, and they will take your word for it, they won't take mine. But if people really want to know the truth, they need to dig deeper to that. There is lots of publication about that, and I don't like what you're saying. This is simply not.
It's obviously
well, we all respect each other's views.
Yes,
just two more people.
On the different television channels, I watched the events in Ukraine since it began. Just in relation to the gentleman there who was saying the police were taking a beating. Now what I saw instances on television of the police there, the assault police, say, repeatedly kicking a protester on the ground. I saw an instance of them making a man take off his clothes, hold on, in freezing temperatures, and the police were taking photographs of this new protester after making him strip off. They were only a couple of instances. So, as far as I could see, the riot police took the initiative in the beginning and started the trouble. That's as an observer. Right?
There's no doubt about that. I said at the beginning.
I disagree with the man there who's saying that the police were getting the beating. They were eventually, but they started the trouble.
My name is Justina. I have a question. Did you think strange leaders and dialogue and help, strange dialogue and help from Union to financial help from Union to Ukraine? Did you think that have a more chance to make the situation and take out the army which came and break liberty this country?
Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be difficult. Things are going to be difficult for Ukraine economically. The European Union has today speaking about 15 billion of aid, but this is not going to be a charity donation. This is going to be austerity. And I think it's going to be worse than the austerity that was imposed on this country, because Ukraine was already much poorer than Ireland. So the IMF, Ukraine is going to have the troika, and people are actually going to suffer economically in order to bring the country back to a situation where its economy can become at least acceptable. The Ukrainian economy is in a terrible state. It was bad before the Orange Revolution. It was worse after the government of Yushchenko and Tymoshenko. It was worse still after Yanukovych got his hands on things. Yet it's very typical of what has happened throughout the former Soviet Union, in that most people have become badly off economically, but some people have become extremely rich. Corruption will have to be rooted out. And once again, while the Party of Regions is undoubtedly a corrupt party, and the opposition is less corrupt, that doesn't mean that there are no corrupt people in the opposition, because there are.
We have one last question from Ronald here.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I wanted to add to what this lady asked, really. Instead of the economy and so on, it's been said that Ukraine, wheat particularly, that it could have a huge effect on the world wheat grain market, this whole business. But I presume it's mostly exported through the Crimea. So can the exports and imports, can the trade continue through Sevastopol? I presume that's their main port, or is it Odessa? I don't know, but is it able to, are they continuing to trade, or are they blockading?
No, but Sevastopol is a military port.
Right.
There are other ports on the Black Sea. There is Odessa.
Mm-hmm.
There is Nikolaev. Sevastopol is a military port.
Okay. Right.
I've been there. I've been on the Black Sea Fleet, and I can tell you, it's no threat. The cruiser Moskva is designed as a ship to fight against other ships in naval battles. There's the Pit-Levy and the Smyt-Levy are destroyers built in the 1960s. Russia hasn't really developed its fleet, its Black Sea fleet, in the way that it has developed its Pacific and White Sea fleets, where it was built. The Pyotr Veliki, etc., stations up in the White Sea fleet right now. And according to the treaty, they should be there until 2042. They're also supposed to be developing an alternative military port in Novorossiysk. But exactly how far they've developed that, it's hard to know, because you're not allowed to go and have a look.
Hannah Dowling wants to ask a question.
Don't know.
The last
well,
one.
Maybe it's a silly question, but I remember, I don't understand what happened with Orange Revolution. Because I remember when it happened, I was in Poland, and everybody was extremely enthusiastic that it is nearly like Polish Solidarność first, almost. And what really happened that it didn't work? In few words.
Well, I'm afraid that when the people behind the Orange Revolution came into power, that they were not able to agree with each other. They basically got involved in internal fighting, and which was,
so it will take some time.
it could happen in Ireland and all that sort of thing as well. People can fight internally in Irish politics too.
But they did get the money.
Sorry?
They did get the money. I mean, Tymoshenko, you want to see our palaces. I saw them the other night on TV.
First, a minor comment. I do think that what you're saying is what officially Russians are chasing. They are going all over Russia that it's the fascists who are getting into power, we must stop them. So they are not calling them fascists. But when we look at the history, whatever happens now, nobody refuses the blood sacrifice for the right sector or any of them. But we also do have to admit that they were the most organized paramilitary section. When the Crimea conflict started, they were the first saying that they will repeat the friendship train that was happening.
Sorry, do you have a question?
Sorry. Okay, the question is, I just wanted to say that there's a bit of misunderstanding in here. We're talking in general and about the past. You know that the George Washington and the ships around it, they got the Turkish agreement to go through Bosphorus, so they're moving up closer. But from what I know, there are additional 2 or 3 warships going from the Baltic fleet to join the Black Sea fleet. But they will have to meet at some stage. We all know that the military confrontation is not actually in the plan, but what way would you see they do have to pass each other at a certain point? What do you think about this?
Well, I can't see any difficulty arising out of that at the moment. For example, in the past years, Russia and NATO have been involved in joint naval exercises. They're probably the captains of the ships from the Baltic Fleet and the American fleet probably even know each other personally. This is a display of a superpower on the one hand and a country that would like to be a superpower on the other. I remember it reminds me of my grandfather who lived in the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, when she saw when partition came about for the first time, and she was stopped by 10 different military groups, and she was when she was going in to do her shopping in Derry, and when she came back she was asked, anything strange today, Margaret? And she said, nah, just wee boys playing soldiers. So we may have wee boys playing sailors in the general Mediterranean Black Sea area.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask some very...
I won't be long. I think everyone is tired of being here. Are you? Yes? I think the gentleman is talking a bit of rubbish. So. Talking about Polish-Ukrainian relations. That's my point. Excuse me, can I have my say? Excuse me, you keep to yourself.
Very briefly.
About Ukrainian-Polish relations. We mustn't forget Volhynia, where thousands and thousands of Poles were murdered by Ukrainians. We mustn't forget about Lviv. That was a heroic Polish city. The interest of Stalin was to establish a permanent quarrel between Poland and Ukraine, and that was it. I don't know if Ukrainians understand that, but there was a certain anger that so many people perished in children. There are photographs and articles in history.
Yes,
okay, yeah, we're going to have to stop
finished.
Yeah.
Okay. Final word from Patrick.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone who contributed tonight. There's been no hard feelings.
Very diplomatic chairman.
No, it's Yarrick here is the chairman.
Oh, you're doing well.
But it's been absolutely fascinating. I've been to Ukraine myself a few times, and it's an amazing country, and I made some friends there to have for the rest of my life. And I'm very, very moved by what's happened recently, and very inspired tonight by Seamus's talk as well, who is someone who is deeply interested in the country. And it's not just that we have different perspectives on it. There are many different perspectives, as Seamus has said. It's a divided country, but in a way we're all divided countries, and we have to find ways to accommodate different opinions, whether right, left, capitalist, socialist. People have to live in harmony if this planet is ever going to survive on it. And it's been wonderful to see so many people here tonight, so many different opinions, and I know we're going to be watching very closely what's going to happen in Ukraine over the next crucial months, and I hope that Seamus will be back to share his experience with us. Thank you.
I'll be grateful to Seamus for the talk.
We are.
May I just say one final word, please? May I just say one final word?
If it remains my friend.
Yes, of course.
Yes, he's your friend. Now, I think that was a very interesting meeting. The atmosphere went up quite nicely, so we're warm by now, I hope. That was a little bit emotional occasionally. We had to. But what's important, we shared our opinions, and these are the lecturer's opinion, and whoever said anything is his or her opinion. And we in the Irish Polish Society, well, our task is the integration, friendship and tradition, and I hope we achieve that purpose today, even if we had a different opinion. So I think if we agree with that, and if we appreciate our lecturer, please give him one more. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
This time. Are you sitting in Dublin?